Got it.
Okay, Jill, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. I know all of you except Desiree. I'm Jill Farrington with NASHIA, where Judy described just a minute ago, and I co-lead this Leading Practices Academy. I have a background in disability employment that was kind of my first career, and my work now is as a technical assistance advisor for NASHIA, working on various projects, including this one that focuses in on criminal and juvenile justice.
And then I'm going to go around how I see you. So Sandra, could you go ahead and go?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Cassandra Palmer. I'm in Georgia. I'm with Brain Injury Association of Georgia, obviously. I come from the work comp background in case management and catastrophic claims and had no idea this was going to be my world. I am a caregiver to a husband who had a rare brain cancer and ended up with a secondary brain injury. From over radiation to the tumor site. So that's what got me. And I was volunteering because I had all this Medicare compliance and case management background, and I became this volunteer support group host. And I didn't know our previous executive director, Jane Jackson, had me lined up in her sites to take over for her this year. So that's where I'm at. And now we have this resource facilitation program. And who knew my whole professional world of case management and insurance and patient advocacy and everything else I've ever done falls right in line with this job to be executive director. So I'm very grateful to be here. I don't miss the corporate world and thankful for this time today. So
Awesome.
taking notes. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Melissa.
Hi guys, my name is Melissa. I am super new to brain injury and an old hat at child welfare. So I started my career, I kind of stumbled into child welfare. I thought I had my dream job lined up. Recession happened. It wasn't lined up. I was scrambling for a job. I spent a couple of years investigating child abuse and neglect, and I loved it, but I needed more time with my kids. So I switched over to the juvenile side of the house. And at the juvenile office, I did some of everything. I did delinquency, I did abuse, neglect, and where my heart wound up was where I spent the last couple of years, which was building resources and community safety networks. So that way we were pro family preservation. Loved it, still love it. But I just did not want to be pigeonholed into doing that forever and a day. And I wanted some experience with a new vulnerable population. So I left child welfare and transitioned over to brain injury back in May.
Great, thank you. And I don't know if you said it, but Melissa's in Missouri. So we have Georgia and Missouri so far. And then Desiree.
Hi, everyone. My name is Desiree. So I'm in North Carolina, and I am with Disability Rights of North Carolina, our state's protection advocacy system. I'm their project manager for their traumatic brain injury justice initiative, and we are working on establishing a pilot program for looking at screenings and supportive services, similar to what other states have done. And we're just here to learn more a little bit about the Leading Practices Academy.
Awesome. So what I think is really extra cool about this group is we have a brain injury association, we have a state brain injury program, and we have protection advocacy. That's really cool. That's rare we get to see that. So thank you all for being here. Jill, if you want to pull up the slides. So today, as we mentioned, we're going to be talking about the Leading Practices Academy on Criminal and Juvenile Justice. And we talked about Jill and I are co-directing that program. Specifically, we did introductions, but we'll give you a background on the Leading Practices Academy, talk about components that are involved with the Academy, what the next steps are if you want to engage with the Academy. And then funding is always an issue for states. So we threw in a few slides just to chat about kind of ways to think about creative ways to think about funding your involvement with the LPA. And then hoping to leave time for questions. So that's kind of how we'll roll here. And honestly, since it's just the three of you, if you have questions while we're going, just jump in and ask them. I think that'll be great instead of waiting. Okay, next slide. Just for kind of quick background, excuse me. As most of you know, I started with NASHIA a couple of years ago, and Maria Crowley also started, and she's our professional development director. And we started to really think that there needed to be some more in-depth TA being provided or training offerings to states. And so we developed NASHIA U, which is meant to be more of a skill building kind of idea. And then out of that came the Leading Practices Academy. And that is really to focus on building infrastructure in the states to support people with brain injuries. The first topic that rose to the level of let's do something with this was criminal and juvenile justice. So that was our first topic for our LPA model. And that started in 2021. So we are in our second year of that currently, and we'll be getting year 3 in January. The idea, we'll get into that more, but it really, as I provide technical assistance across the country, and the work that Jill and I did when we were both working for Colorado, the need around identifying people with brain injury in the justice system was just very glaring. And there are several states that have done some work on it, but there hasn't been really a concerted effort in terms of best practice models and that kind of thing until now. And actually, Desiree, I'm hoping you'll have a little time to share about your project, because you're actually leading the way in terms of kind of consolidating some of the efforts across the country. In 2022, just this last August, NASHIA launched the Leading Practices Academy on Behavioral Health. So similar kind of idea, thinking about the behavioral health systems in states. What are the infrastructures that need to be put in place to ensure people with brain injury who are intersecting with behavioral health are getting the supports they need? So there are 5 states in that behavioral health LPA right now. For the criminal juvenile justice one, to date, we've had 9 states participate in our LPA. This current year, we have 4 states engaged. Next slide. So as we talked about, we're the faces of it, and you'll be talking to us a lot if you decide to engage in this opportunity. So I don't think I have to spend a lot of time on these data because I think you're all pretty aware, but just to highlight a few things, we know that the prevalence is significant when we talk about brain injury in both the criminal and juvenile justice setting. For juvenile justice, the meta-analysis that is being reviewed for publication found that around 44% of all justice-involved juveniles had exposure to brain injury at some point. So when they did screening, that's what they were finding. In adult incarcerated populations, it's reported to range from 41 to 55%, up to 60, up to 80%. And I'll say to both of these, we tend to see kind of a pattern that if we catch people early, saying like if they're engaged in probation or with youth and diversion, problem-solving courts for adults, before they engage in jail or escalate up the justice system, we see that those numbers are a little lower. The percentage rates are a little lower. But once they start getting into jail or incarceration, we see those numbers being much higher. And some of the other drivers of the high percents, we know that there's significant rates with female offenders specifically. Big part of that is understanding that they've been engaged in domestic violence and have experienced brain injury as a result of that. And then there's a huge co-occurrence of brain injury with behavioral health issues. And so we see high numbers with people who have both substance abuse, mental illness, and then brain injury. So kind of that unfortunate trifecta. We know that individuals with brain injury report greater numbers of incarceration than those without. And that's a study that was done by Adam Piccolino and his colleagues, Solberg. And he's from Minnesota, and they kind of led the way with really diving into this along with South Carolina and some other states. So we see that playing out still significantly. Next slide. I want to put this in the context of mental health, because I feel like although we have a really long way to go in our country in terms of how we support people with mental illness engaged in the justice system, at minimum, there is an awareness of it. And I think our challenge is to increase the awareness of brain injury in the system. And one of the kind of things that jumped out to me is that the rates are really similar. If you look at 64% in local jails, 56 in state prisons, 45 in federal prisons have mental illness. Those are, you map them right on top of brain injury. And honestly, if they screen those people for brain injury, probably most of them have brain injury. So I think that understanding that so we can leverage and learn from what has taken place in terms of supporting people with mental illness in these systems, I think we can do something similar with brain injury. So our big goal and how the leading practices hopes to kind of achieve this goal we discussed next, but is to provide criminal justice systems with education and tools for identifying people with brain injury and supporting people once they understand someone has a brain injury. Okay. So we use this framework. Are you guys familiar with sequential intercept model? A little, okay, I see a little shaking of the head. Yep,
Yes.
okay. Well, just real quickly, this is the framework we use with our Leading Practices Academy on Criminal and Juvenile Justice as a way to help states think about where do you want to intervene. It'd be great if you could be everywhere for everybody. Most of the time, that's not going to be feasible, at least in the beginning. And so we work with states to think through what point of intercept or points of intercept. It doesn't have to be just one. Do you feel like you have maybe strong partnerships? Do you feel like there's some traction, whether it be through policy in your states or funding in your states? Where do you want to start intervening? So if you look at this, I mean, intercept 0 is actually before engagement. It's like law enforcement might be engaged because they're being called on a crisis call, and a lot of states have that co-responder model. So how do we do work at that crisis level to help prevent engagement with the justice system or further engagement on up the ladder? So law enforcement, we've had some states engage with their law enforcement to help educate about brain injury. Moving into the court appearances, what can we do in that area? Specialty courts and jail, and then going into intercept 3 includes prison, by the way. It's not on there, but when they say jail in this context, they're talking incarcerated, so it includes prison and jail. And then intercept 4 is all about reentry, which is another great place to do some work to help set people up for success now that they've left the system and keep them out of the system moving forward. And then parole and probation and community corrections and intercept 5. So that's one of the first steps we take with people when they're engaged with our LPAs, to kind of look at this intercept, think about where your state wants to land within that framework. Next slide. So, oh, Jill, is this yours? I'm like losing track. Oh, no. Okay. So in terms of addressing the problem, this is again where this idea of developing this Leading Practices Academy came up. So NASHIA can provide technical assistance to help your state develop customized approach to improving outcomes for justice involved individuals across that sequential intercept model, depending on where you want to go. A number of states have started to tackle this problem, haven't tackled it. That would be a gross over exaggeration, but have started to. And Desiree, that's where some of her work has come in, where she's been meeting and learning from states what they're doing. But at minimum, a core of what a lot of states are doing is screening for brain injury across that kind of sequential intercept model. So I feel like we're making a dent with this problem. Even though there's some best practices out there. Oh, Desiree, did you want to say something?
No, I was just nodding in agreement.
Okay. Even though there's some best practices out there, implementation can be challenging. Like, where do we start? What of that overwhelming system called the justice system, and where do we begin to target and think about supporting them? How to advise state partners on protocol development, and evaluation is another component, so you can scale up. So these are some of the things that we are hoping through the Leading Practices Academy to help you out with. And we use a very customized approach. No two states look alike in how they approach us, yet there are some core components that most states are implementing. And that's what we would help you determine in your state. Next. So it's, the era of COVID actually hit kind of right when we were developing this, and it's worked out quite well, actually, that we are a fully online leading practices academy. So there's no in-person work in terms of what NASHIA will be doing with you. That's up to you and your states in terms of when you pull your state team together, if you would do in-person work or not, but all of our work is online. We provide approximately 20 hours per year per state for technical assistance. We start with just assessing where you're at, talking with you about what it is you want to accomplish, what your goals are, and then helping you work through how to meet those goals through bi-monthly state team meetings. So I mentioned that you will have a state team if you're engaged with this, and the teams tend to include a variety of players. Ironically, again, the three of you would be, if you were in one state, you'd be on the team probably. We usually have the Brain Injury Alliance, State Brain Injury Program, and PNA, when possible, have them engaged. And then your justice partners. So thinking through whatever point of intercept you're in, who are the partners on the justice side that need to be engaged? And then anybody else that you feel is important to engage. More specifically, our technical assistance, we have a kickoff meeting. So once you start, we would do a kickoff meeting where we review more in depth about kind of what the sequential intercept model is and how to think about that and how to think about where to start your interventions. We have 4 all-state academy meetings. So we bring all the state teams together, excuse me. And it's a great idea or great time, I mean, for you all to learn from each other. And we find that we kind of sit back and listen, and people really learn a lot from hearing what other people's experiences are. But we also bring in training to those meetings and subject matter experts. So you, depending on what your topic is, we'll be bringing in subject matter experts to those 4 meetings. We also do state lead meetings, and those are more ad hoc, kind of as needed. And it's just a time for you as kind of the lead of your state team to come together with other leads and just do some problem solving together, not with your full teams, but more across those state leads. We already talked a little bit about peer support, and resource sharing is a big part of this. So we develop, we have an online hub with NASHIA where we have been collecting resources over the last few years. You'll have one for your cohort year. If there's fact sheets there that we can work with you to adapt for your state. There's other training materials, best practice guides that are there for your use. So we try to keep that all in one place so that you all can have access and see what's out there for you. Okay, next slide.
Okay, and before we go on, I wanted to piggyback on something Judy said about the information and the resources that are available on the hub. We assure that if recordings are all uploaded, so when we have academy sessions, it's nice to be able to send a recording to maybe a partner that has to miss some of the topics that we've been able to do in the past couple of years, or things like psychoeducation for adults, for youth, risk, need, responsivity, evaluation, universal language. Those are just a couple of the topics that come to mind. But we were really fortunate at the beginning of the LPA to work with the University of Denver and some student cohorts that worked alongside Judy and I to develop tailored infographics that really indicate and help communicate the need based on each state's statistics. And so those are all located in our hub. And what we've been able to do in the subsequent year 2, is continue to push those out in a more customized way for the new states that jump on with their branding, colors, logo, and then their tools that can be used with stakeholders, decision makers, boards, to really try to convey why this is such a problem that needs to be addressed. So lots of really great information that's located on the hub. What we would look for from states that are interested is to complete a brief online survey. The link is located here. We'll also drop it into the chat here in a second as well. It's a form that lets us know of some interest in the 2023 year. And it asks for the information as states know it about, what their current situation is, and if they believe what phase they believe they're in, just really early on exploring, or if they're currently talking with other partners and they're maybe in development or implementation stage, or maybe they've had some work underway and they really want to look at how to best sustain the effort. We look for potential goals, prospective target populations, prospective partners, and to be honest, some states don't know the answer to those. They are just at the very beginning, and they let us know that, and that's where we start. We have some continuing states that will be a part of the Leading Practices Academy for 2023. So it's a nice blend of states that are kind of underway and then states that are just beginning their work. So any questions up to now before we move on into strategies?
Yeah, I've got one. Where's Georgia at this level right now for probably emerging?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. And Desiree, maybe you know, because you've been doing the research across the country. Is Georgia doing work in this area?
Hey, can you repeat the question, Cassandra?
Yeah, where is Georgia show up on basically for legal this whole thing that we're sitting in on today, and as far as best practices for the criminal justice and brain injury?
So Georgia falls under currently not screening or providing services under criminal or juvenile justice. We reached out to them about a year ago, and they informed us that they weren't currently doing anything in this sector. But they also did not inform us if they were going to work into this area. So in the database that we created, we put them under no. But I mean, it's good to see you here so that, you could potentially start this.
Well, out of pure honesty and transparency, I was starting off as the new executive director. I didn't know who I didn't know. And I was just like, all right, let me do the, hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? Hey, I'm the new gal. And so I reached out to criminal justice and they said my services were needed. They'd let me know. I have heard from, it was like it was a patient advocate, not patient, a victim, some kind of court case, something going on. But that's the only thing I've heard from them since I came in January. So, okay.
And that's
I think
not atypical. Sorry, Jill. Your experience with that. And that's partly why we do the academy work, is because it really is more of a marathon than a sprint in terms of engagement when it comes to brain injury in the criminal justice system and raising that awareness. And a lot of states that we've worked with have started just by doing training, just awareness raising. And eventually that leads to, hey, I guess maybe we need to do something about this kind of thing. So I wouldn't be discouraged by that completely. That's a pretty typical response that I think we get. And then it can grow into more substantial work.
And I think, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say I agree with Judy. Most states, when we reached out to them, they did not know if they were currently doing anything. And then when they did find out, they got back to us and said that they weren't. So, I mean, it's still kind of like an up and coming thing for most areas.
Yeah, I would only just add on to what's been said now, that sometimes it's just the synchronicity of partners coming together at the right time, where there's an opening or there's some possibilities for a pilot or something, you know, innovative to even just see if that you can help make the case by doing some screening and collecting some numbers and then giving that back. We've had states where there's some very interested legislators that want to hear about this issue, and then they want to know, how can I help? So there's a lot of different strategies. There's a lot of different ways that people go about the process of getting involved in this area. All right.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about funding. So the cost to be engaged in the LPA is $10,000 for the year. And so, you know, it's I know no small change for a lot of us, and when we start looking at our budgets, but there are some really great ways that people have gotten this work funded so they could be engaged. A big part of funding comes from existing traumatic brain injury implementation grants. So the Administration for Community Living TBI partnership grants, of which each one of you have one in your state. So, you know, obviously you guys know, I think you know who those folks are in your state, but, and if they have something that is focused at all on screening or focused on underserved populations or criminal justice specifically, then if they have any discretionary funds left in their grants, this could be a way to fund that. Other ways of doing it, though, are looking at blended funding, because again, we know that the co-occurrence of behavioral health and criminal juvenile justice is really significant. Sometimes people have gone to their mental health system, their behavioral health system, and there's oftentimes already a criminal justice initiative going on within behavioral health in states. So finding out if that's happening, finding out if there's a way to partner and collaborate with some blended funding to engage in the LPA. Other areas that you could look at are your Department of Youth Services, Department of Corrections, protection and advocacy. Desiree's on. Sometimes PNAs have this as part of their TBI goals, and maybe have some funds that they could put toward it. And then if you have a focus on veterans, veteran affairs might be a good place to look. What I didn't mention on the slide, but has come up recently, one of our states has used their Developmental Disability Council, who had you know, funds that they award out in their state, and they applied for those funds, received them to do this work. Even though, you know, they're talking about brain injury that's acquired before the age of 21, it can technically be a developmental disability. So there is a fit and mission there if you're looking at youth specifically, but even beyond. So that would be one. A couple of our states have partnered with their departments of health if they're not in their Department of Health, as it relates to the core. I always screw this up, and Melissa, maybe you know what these are called, core VIP, core SIP. They're the violence and injury prevention grants that the Centers for Disease Control give out. And most states have one of these grants, and TBI is one of their priority areas, there being the CDC's priority area. So that would be another place to maybe engage in conversation is your health departments to see if they have this and if this might be of interest. And if you want more information on that one specifically, Alaska is funded that way right now, and we could connect you to the person who's running that through their core VIP program. Other ideas that there's grants out there in terms of opioid response. A lot of states have SOAR grants, the state opioid response grants, and that might be a way to fund some of this work. The Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration provides block grants to states, and they have grants themselves. That might be another way. And then foundations, just going to a foundation that has criminal juvenile justice or underserved populations as a priority area and seeing if you can secure funds. That's how North Dakota got in a year ago. So there's just a variety of ways you can think about funding these services.
we just got word today, in fact, that there may be a state that is going to effectively partner with one of their managed care organizations who has an interest in this work. The totally new idea to us, but it's such a fit, you know, when you think about screening and identification and health outcomes.
I'm going to send you, so I will tell you one of the things Missouri that has kind of been a godsend. It's called the RPG, or the Regional Partnership Grant. It's administered by the Administration for Children, Youth, and Families of the Children's Bureau. But that RPG grant is a godsend, and it is incredibly flexible. We have used that RPG grant to get like intimate partner violence training. We have used it to keep families together by means of updating houses or paying daycare, not permanently, but just kind of as a stopgap. So that may be another great way to tap into some of those funds, because it is really diverse as far as you have to account for where it goes, but what you use it for, as long as it is supporting family preservation, they're really not particularly picky about it.
That's great to know. And do all states have that, Melissa? Is it a federal funding source that goes to states?
It is a federal funding source. I will tell you, here is what is great, but maybe not so great. Every state is allowed to apply for, but the people who are not people, the regions that are approved fastest are the large geographic low service ones. So that RPG is designed to target some of those geographically hard to reach, because there's such a disparity in services.
Okay.
That's kind of where they came and why they allow such flexibility for that. So getting RPG in, say, downtown Atlanta, they're going to kind of be on the lower end of the list. Rural Georgia, where there's not a lot, they will skyrocket to the top of the list.
Oh, that's interesting. Thanks. Desiree, did you have a question or comment?
Just a question, and it was referring to a comment that was said just now about a state that was partnering with their managed care organization. Do y'all know which state it is?
Yeah, it's Nebraska.
Oh, that's great. Awesome.
Yep, they've been engaged in our LPA for 2 years now, and they've been seeking funding for resource facilitation and more kind of broader implementation of what they've set up. And Peggy Reicher, who's the executive director of the Nebraska's Brain Injury Alliance, did a presentation, so kind of the power of the presentation and raising awareness to the managed care organizations. And then they reached out to her and said they had funding, and they were curious if that's something she could use for this initiative. So
That's awesome.
Fingers crossed. It's not a done deal, but it's looking, you know, possible and favorable.
Yeah, that sounds promising.
It does. And I don't know, I know you guys in Missouri have managed care, North Carolina. Do you guys have managed care in Georgia as well?
No, we need
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
You would think we would. No. Georgia,
Yeah,
we're going to turn Georgia around. I don't understand Georgia. We're so sophisticated in some areas, and then in others, I don't know. I'm sure that's everywhere though, right? Everybody's got
true.
something amazing about their state, and
And then not
so
so
much.
Yeah.
Judy, I may or may not have heard this, but I don't know that we covered the some of the examples of different.
Yeah, I'm not sure we did either. So
No, I'm going to pop that up so that we can share with these guys what some of the other states have focused in on.
Yeah. So some of this will look really familiar to work that you have been engaged in or populations that you're working with. But so as I said, as you think about that sequential intercept model, there are a variety of places people are choosing to interact. So some of our current ones and past ones have looked at supporting parents involved in the child welfare system. So for example, screening those parents to see if they have brain injury, providing them the supports to mitigate the effects of the brain injury so that they can be successful navigating the child welfare system. And it's all about family preservation, which Melissa talked about in Missouri as well. In California, we're working with screening young adult foster care youth, and it's kind of the crossover youth. That's the term I use. That's not an official term. Those who have been engaged in child welfare, but also now have children and are engaged on that end as well, because they're at risk of losing their children. They maybe have been experienced justice engagement or intimate partner violence. And so this is where California has chosen to look at screening and support. Many states have looked at juvenile justice sites. In fact, our full cohort this year is all about juvenile justice, and across those spectrum of diversion, detention, probation, and those who are detained. So, I mean, well, I guess that's detention, detention and probation. So kind of looking at, again, that screening and support in that setting. Law enforcement, which when we talk about law enforcement engagement, it takes on a little different form because our engagement with them is not so, or their engagement with an individual is short and quick and more crisis response. So providing them tools and education about what brain injury is so that they can have better interactions at that level. Screening individuals at the adult probation and parole system. So thinking about those being released from jail and prisons, or maybe haven't gone to jail or prison, because that could be on probation, could be on either end of that spectrum. And then in the adult correction setting, so more like the prison setting. So you can see that we really have over the last couple of years covered that full continuum across that sequential intercept model. Thanks, Jill.
Yeah, for sure.
What other questions do people have or thoughts?
How do we engage the criminal justice system to, like, if I reached out to them just saying, hey, I'm the new executive director, we have these, you know, we actually survived COVID, we have support groups, you know, you want to connect, and they didn't. So how do you get them to, and I get it, their world is different than our world, and I get it. But how do you get them to move?
Well, I think the first step is thinking about training and raising that awareness, because honestly, when we started this in Colorado and we did our first presentation, it was kind of, it was for probation, and it was the director for training that invited us to come do it. But even she would say, I didn't realize what big problem it was. I just was kind of curious to hear what you had to say. And then when we did the training and provided the data and talked about kind of what can be done to support people, it was like the biggest light bulb went off for her. And then, so she became our champion. And that's part of it, is just finding who is that champion in the system that you want to engage in. And also just thinking about what point of that intercept you want to start, because it's like an elephant. I mean, you know, that whole thing about taking on the elephant one bite at a time, because it is huge. And so I think that that's some of the work we do with states when we do this, when they're engaged with the LPA, is thinking through, where can you gain traction? Where can you find that champion? And part of that is looking at, what are the policies in your state? You know, like, again, using Colorado as an example, because that's where Jill and I started this work. Our governor at the time had a huge initiative around behavioral health and screening for behavioral health issues. And so then we're like, oh, okay, maybe if we talk to the behavioral health system, we can get brain injury included. And they did. They included in some of their legislation that screening for brain injury would happen. So it's just kind of thinking through that, but it really starts with raising that awareness and the light bulb. Desiree.
I think Cassandra's question is a very fair and common one. I think we had the same one last year. How do we just interact with the system here in North Carolina and kind of narrow it down with which section of the intercept model? And we found that even though our main goal was our DPS system, we found that because of what was going on at the current moment with the COVID climate and staffing shortages and resources and whatnot, we kind of reframed our goal and looked at specialty and recovery courts. We found that that has really helped ours. And of course, our pilot is nowhere near launching or anything like that. But I think a lot of the times is, trial and error and seeing which ones, stick and which ones are willing to be, active participants in something so innovative in the system.
This is like sales, you guys. When I did sales support, and you just got to keep knocking on doors. Okay, so maybe
true.
that one wasn't the right door. It's
Yeah,
just not the only
that's
door in the
basically
criminal
it.
justice. Yeah.
That's
So
basically it. Yeah.
I will tell you, and it's so incredibly sad to say this, but you will think, my gosh, that's a jackpot. When you go to some of the resource poor communities that are struggling for any type of attention or support they can get, they will take it hook, line, and sinker, and they will help you in ways that you didn't ever expect, which will then make it easier to sell to those resource rich communities. The resource rich communities, which is where I spent my time as a juvenile officer, are completely different than the resource poor. Where I investigated abuse and neglect, if you would have told me 50 miles from the capital city, people poop in buckets and live in homes with no electric, I would have called you a liar, except it absolutely happens. So in those resource poor communities, they are desperate for anything they can get. If you were to bring this to Cole County, where I live and where I was a juvenile officer, I don't want to say we would blow you off, but you would be nowhere near the top of the list, because we have all of these other things that are established, all of these other working relationships, all of these expectation and known. So you will not get the same response as if you were to go 40 miles down the road to that resource poor community, where they're like, what? If you give me paperwork, I'll do all of the stuff. Let me help you. We will go the extra mile for you. And so it is kind of like sales, and it is an unfortunate reality. But if you start in some of those high geography, low service areas, I promise you will get much further. And child welfare, while it is a gigantic system, is a very small, it's kind of like, the military. You think it's huge, except everybody knows somebody that knows somebody. And so when you go to those bigger resource rich communities, you can say, oh, I've been working with Judy over here in Cole County. And then they send Judy an email saying, Judy, is this legit? And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's all these. And then it opens the door without you actually having to do the work.
That's really
Keep knocking on doors. That's what I'm hearing. That's my takeaway out of the meeting today.
The poor
ladies
doors,
and
the
gentlemen.
poor resource deprived doors.
The deprived doors.
It
Yeah,
is.
I mean, that's what I was thinking too. I'm like, this lady can be the end all be all of Georgia criminal justice. Like, anyhow. Yeah, I'll just keep knocking on doors. It's just, don't
When
you guys
you
feel like you
Google-
need a clone? I need more of me.
Yeah.
So all the states through the Census Bureau have their demographics published. And so if you Google poorest county in your state, that is exactly where I would start.
Wow. Writing that one down. I think that's gold.
Good. Yeah. I do want to acknowledge that someone else joined, and I apologize if I get your name wrong, but is it Zacchaeus?
Yes, please. You're correct. It's Zacchaeus Ahonle. And sorry all that I joined in late. I was actually caught up there with my work at Mississippi State University. So I'm an assistant professor at Mississippi State University, and I do have a student who is my graduate assistant, and she is supposed to be working on a research paper, and she seems to be interested in juvenile re-entry for ex-offenders into the community with visa employment. So I just thought, okay, I saw these and I said, okay, let me try to join and then see what it is all about and see how that can help. So that's why I'm here, but I'm enjoying the conversation. I wish I joined in earlier, and I missed the resources the lady mentioned a moment ago where to start from. If you can put that on the chat, I really appreciate that too. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. And any information you want or need after this, just follow up with us. We're happy to chat or have your student follow up with us. This is stuff we love to talk about. So
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I mentioned the recording will be available, so I'll likely work on just getting that out to, the different individuals that had signed up for today. And that way, if you even want to share it with a colleague, Jane, for example, in Georgia, Cassandra, if that's something you'd like to do, we'll get that recording link out.
That would be great. And I guess before we leave, I should mention, so BIAA, what do we do? We are an affiliate of BIAA, and it's all about advocacy. And I do know there was that PTSD law enforcement training law that just passed Senate.
Yep.
So yeah,
everything. The president has signed it. It is law.
it is law now. Beautiful. So we do have that. That's good.
Yeah. And for those who might not be aware, and I'm not going to remember the law number or any of that, but
yeah, I don't either. But.
Yeah, it's just some work, piece of legislation that was just passed this past year that helps us think about how to get training out to police officers around PTSD and brain injury, and think about what kind of supports need to be in place for those populations within the criminal juvenile justice system. And maybe as a follow-up, we can send that law out to you all too, because I really do, I've been mentioning as I've been talking that policy is a good launching point. So if your state has particular policies in place or initiatives, funding that are going toward supporting criminal juvenile justice, especially if you think about behavioral health, that's an avenue. That's an avenue for us who look at brain injury because there's such a high co-occurrence. And so thinking about how do you engage people with those initiatives going on to help them understand brain injury is probably part of the picture they're dealing with, but may not know it. And so I just strongly encourage thinking about what's in your state in that regard as well. And then this federal legislation that should be helpful. I mean, it's brand new. We're still getting our heads around what it all means, but it is out there and it's a good tool for us to think about using.
Yeah, with the just passing, I just would be anxious to see how that rolls out, what maybe it'll be helpful for us. So,
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you ladies are beautiful. I always enjoy everything I attend. So thank you.
Thank
We
you,
enjoy
Cassandra.
your energy and passion and enthusiasm. And
Thanks. Well, we need more people out here. It's
I
pushing
know.
a big rocks up big hills, people.
That's right.
there's a lot to go around just on this session today. So just as a reminder, we're looking to get interest forms by December 2nd. And then about a week later, we'll start to formalize the process with the states that'll join in 2023. And then we just go about getting you all scheduled, and we lay it out for the whole year. We try to keep it very low effort on your part. We try to really do the lift in terms of the coordination, the scheduling, and put that out on your calendars throughout, the year, so that everything is set up and we don't have to do a lot of polling along the way. So, be in touch with questions, follow-up areas to clarify. Yeah. Anything else, Judy?
Yeah, I guess I would just add that, of course, you're just learning about this. So if you don't have all your ideas around how you would even fund to be a part of this, that's okay. Go ahead and complete the form. And, it's something that we can have conversations about. we've had states even who've been waiting to hear about a foundation grant, who joined just a little later. So, I just want you to know that NASHA is very flexible in terms of timing and your funding, and understanding that it's challenging to get that all lined up. So we can help work with you on that too.
I want to pursue this. I know it's a worthwhile goal, and maybe our thing with Georgia. Let me talk with Craig and Kanisha. I feel like, actually, going back to the movies, guys, don't you feel like, I can't think of the name? She's on the airplane. She's like, "Help me, I'm poor." Do you guys know what movie I'm talking about? It's her birthday. Her friends get married.
Kristen
Oh
Wiig.
my gosh.
Kristen Wiig.
Yes. Oh my gosh. She's such
I
a
love
train
her.
wreck. So I feel like I have to be the train wreck, right? Going, "Help me, I'm poor. I need this program and for brain injuries." I don't know, guys, but yeah, I'm in. I'll see what I can do.
That's awesome.
You're terrific. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Enjoyed
Thanks.
this. I really enjoy you guys. Take care. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Stop.